So we have a lot of new inputs, a lot of very diverse thinking. I think we have also heard a lot of different perspectives. And I think now we will go and dive into the same again in a very different way. So I would like to welcome again Marce, Elisabeth and Anshu, and they will now give a little glimpse, a little insight what has been created during their 3 months residency, where they were based in Arbonne and then traveling a lot to all the different partner firms to find new ideas and also to develop processes and projects. As you will see later on, we have a small presentation, physical presentation also in the Atelier House where we are going also to have our aperitif afterwards. You will be able to talk to everybody, you will see the results, and I think you will also see this is all about moving. This is not all about fixing something and have a product. This is a movement. But now the floor is yours, Marce. Thanks for presenting the first. And Meret, you will have a look at their work. I mean, you come a little bit from outside and you will have a look at their work and processes in a different way. Thank you, Meret, for guiding us through.
Thank you. So it's my pleasure to introduce the 3 residents. We will start with Marce. Marce is an artist, a performer and poet based in Berlin, but originally from east of Switzerland. During their residency with TaDA, Marce explored the connections between language, textiles and performance, and also smell, with a particular focus on scented garments as tools for sensory storytelling and incorporating marginalized narratives into fabric design. So quite an interdisciplinary approach, connecting, as I said, textile, history, tradition, but also scent and smell. We all are used to connect with. And I'm very curious what you're presenting. Just maybe, as you know, Marce holds a Bachelor in Fine Art from the Basel Academy of Art and Design and the Academy of Fine Art in Warsaw in Poland, and then a Master in Art Praxis from the Dutch Art Institute. So Marce has been severally exhibited. He has several awards, including the Swiss Art Awards 2024, just recently, but also the Swiss Performance Art Award the last year, and the Fordenberger Gildewart Award, and many more. So I'm very curious to hear now what your project is, and the stage is yours.
Thank you, Meret, for the introduction, and thanks everyone for being here. I will just... Oh. Is that the first slide? Yeah. No. Okay. Yeah, I will. It's funny to be confronted with my original application again. I will put that a little bit into perspective. But yeah, as Meret already said, I have a background as an artist, working mostly with performance, but also making objects and installation, of which you see here just a quick visual example. I do research into linguistics, histories, materialities, fragrances, and poetry. And the textile entered my work on the one hand through costumes, using costumes in my performative work, but on the other hand also with knitting, of which you see an example here, and the entanglement of knitting and encoding language, but also impregnation. So usually it's like fragranced garments. As you can see here, they were perfumed, for example, these knit pieces. This is a quote I always like to bring because it really inspires me for what I do. it is just a little definition of that is part of an essay that queer scholar Jose Esteban Munoz wrote titled Ephemera as Evidence, where he talks about what the ephemeral means. And I really love this part about the ephemeral as being that which is left over after a performance. Traces, glimmers, residues, the things that are sticky, memories maybe also. Here, just as a quick note, you can also see some textile aspects. There's a costume hanging from the ceiling that has like a knitted label on it. And this object on the floor is also knitted and has a poem encoded into the blade. Yeah. Great. So yeah, as you heard, I applied with like an interest in storytelling, also in relation to fragrance, the performative potential of textiles. But then more specifically, in the first weeks of the residency, an interest in the interplay of softness and hardness became interesting to me, and you will find out why very soon, but also textile as a potential basis for notation, performance notations, as well as the relationship or potential relationships between textile histories and queerness, and notions of orientation, mostly coming from Sarah Ahmed's queer phenomenology, where she poses the question of how do we orientate ourselves in a space, and when does orientation become an issue? I've made like a couple different sort of strands, been working on a couple different strands of research during my residency, but for the presentation I will focus on two, of which you see the start here. One of the first things that I found really stunning were examples of lace collars. This is an example of one that is part of the collection of the Textile Museum in St. Gallen, with who I was also luckily able to collaborate. The shape, but also the collar as something that can be quite discreet, but it can also be super super extravagant and change a way of dressing, for example. This is an image of a piece of lace I saw at Filtex in St. Gallen, and it struck me that to my lay eye, this didn't really look like thread at all. It looked like something that was made of another material, something that was maybe 3D printed or produced by little snails excrementing calciferous matter into these beautiful shapes. But I found this amazing, and it was at this time that I was thinking about the lace and this like weird materiality that I got a bunch of yarn from Tisca, which you see here. It's this kind of like velour yarn, and I started experimenting with these. It's very soft, although when I tried using it on my knitting machine, it turned out that it's a bit difficult because of the thread tension. It's not a very stable fiber, so knitting it, sometimes the tension would be too strong and the thread would break. So in my attempt to solve this, I started to jump one needle, so I would knit a bit looser, so that maybe, and that actually worked. The thread didn't break so often, but I didn't think this would produce anything interesting other than me finally being able to just knit with this yarn. However, because the yarn has this velour surface, when it moves, it doesn't really move against each other. It's not very it's flexible when you pull it, but it's not flexible just by itself. Wearing this, maybe over time you would see a change, but just lying there or like small manipulations don't really produce a change. But what you see here are two first sort of like attempts that I made at knitting a textile with this yarn. On the left side, directly as it comes from the knitting machine, On the right side, you may see a difference because that was heat pressed before. But what I could see is that when I pull it, of course, these like jumped stitches, they move. And then the yarn becomes, or the textile becomes bigger. The weave becomes bigger. I can create three-dimensional shapes. I can change the texture. I can enlarge something. I can change the shape of something that was before rectangular and is now not anymore. In a next step, I was trying to figure out how to control these manipulations. And one thing that I could do was to attach what you see on the left. I don't know how well the contrast is, but this part here is a glue foil that you can heat press on fabrics in order for them to be stabilized a little bit, or at least that's what I used it for. And that's the front side of the same textile. Using these jumped stitches here, where you see that there's a stitch missing. And this would basically be the same texture, but because it was not fixated, I could pull it apart. And that's how you get this difference in structure, merely by just pulling it with my hand. And especially in relation to working with colors, this provided, I mean, this is like a technical small thing, but working on the knitting machine, it was substantial because it meant that I can knit rectangular forms that won't be rectangular in the end. Otherwise, I would sort of have to knit a really complicated, rounded trapezoid. But instead, I could work with rectangles and then just manipulate them afterwards. This was the very first attempt at creating a collar that then could also become a sleeve, still using this foil to stick two sides of the same together. But I was also reminded again of why I started working with this yarn, which was this like really weird materiality. The yarn itself, like the lace I showed at the beginning, has something very soft, but it also kind of looks like, in the gray, kind of looks like concrete or something similar. So I started thinking about the collar maybe more as getting away or introducing another idea to it. So not just the textile, but also that of jewelry or of just performing, being one material and performing another materiality altogether, sort of like referencing these classic chokers that we all know and love so much. And here, of course, then also trying to work with this difference or this contrast of softness and hardness, the perceived hardness of metal. This was a first attempt at making such a choker. It is again knitted with the same yarn. You can see that the edge that is kind of like a bit wavier was pulled, but then I sprayed it with silver spray that you can buy at a I like the word, at a store. But the thing that it does is it makes the textile more rigid. It dries down and sort of produces these calcifications. I didn't want that, but it was great that we visited another one of our partners, EMPA, who had told us about a process that is called plasma coating. And if I understood it correctly, plasma coating involves a metal that you have on one side. It is hit by a ray of plasma. Don't ask me to define that. And then this produces, let's call it a cloud of this metal, be it silver, be it titanium, as we will see later, gold, copper, and then these particles attach to the textile. The advantage of this process is, as opposed to this sort of crafty solution I had, that the surface texture doesn't change. So I will still have the softness of the yarn while getting a metal coding. EMPA, of course, uses this for completely different things. Okay. In biotechnology, or as like stitched or embroidered sensors, for example, to regulate body temperature. And here you can see an example of one of these textiles that was actually coated with titanium. So that's the gray stuff that you see is the coating. Oh yeah. One thing that sort of was unexpected for me, I already knew that I already felt like there was a lot of potential interpretations of what material interpretations, but after the coding, another layer kind of added to it, which was the architectural one, because suddenly I started thinking about this piece also as something that has a patina, so the coding as a patina, as a sort of plastering maybe even, on a facade that has seen different weather. And it kind of like brought me back to the question that maybe I started with also in this presentation, that is, how do stories or memories and experiences enter textiles? This is another example. All of these you will also see over there, but here you can kind of see the little bit of shine that the titanium gave. And this is the one that for me kind of highlighted this aspect of architecture and patina a bit more. This was one part, but sort of like staying on the notion of storytelling and how stories would enter textiles. I want to talk a little bit about fragrance, and something that I always, well, the example that you see here is that here, for example, I use scented blankets performatively to bring a fragrance into a smell. And the image that you saw earlier, they were perfumed as well. So I wanted to continue this line of research, and someone that always kind of accompanies me on this path is Ursula Le Guin, who beautifully talks about her writerly practice, actually, but for me it's really important to think through the textile and fragrant matter as well. Looking at the book as a medicine bundle, holding things in particular, in a particular powerful relation to each other. I had a conversation with Martin Leuthold, which ended up making this first little wearable thing. Martin was talking to me about how he would produce one garment, correct me if I'm wrong, and they would have little buttonholes at the back so that you could fill it still. So it was a double layered textile. You could put in feathers in this case to create a colorful garment, and then use this garment in a second step to, for example, sew a piece of clothing. So this is also a double-sided little ornament that has a buttonhole at the back. You can wear it on your shirt or on any button anywhere. In this case, it's filled with cocoa and cloves. I made a second test again with cocoa and cloves, trying to go a bit bigger and really think about it as a textile, as something that could become big and become the basis for a garment to be sewn from it. But also thinking about this as kind of like an analog diffuser, something that brings scent into the space without needing technology or electricity or anything. Here we can see another test, which is even bigger. This time I used flowers, or kind of like an arrangement of flowers. Also because in my work, there's been a bit of a history of combining research on queerness and botanics. If we think about notions such as a streak of lavender or pansy, usually kind of like used by dominant culture to identify or harass queer people. So I wanted to make an arrangement of flowers, but also thinking about florals as one of the really important categories in fragrance. These are details of a bigger test that I also made that you can see over at the little presentation. In this case, you can maybe you can see that there's a little, maybe it's my head, that there's a little gradient because I'm mixing different ingredients. But it was at this point that I also found it interesting, what if the textile can become a recipe, if it can become an instruction, or a formula, for example, the size of the pockets and the order of the pockets denoting quantities and the order in which you have to work with it. So this was a little glimpse into two researches I made. Another one was with Martin Schlegel. You will see pieces over there too. I hope this journey continues. And I will close with this. I recommend you go to the Straw Museum in Wohlen, not just because you can take a cute selfie with a hat at the end, but also because it has some really stunning pieces. But first and foremost, I want to say thank you to Elizabeth and Anshu for the 3 months we had in Arbon and the food we shared, but also to Marianne and Martina, and I don't see Martina, and Florin Aye, okay. And all the people that I've been able to work with. Yeah, okay, let's keep it up on sentiment.
Thank you, Marce, for this more than just little glimpses in your work you did in the last few weeks and months. I do have one question, and it brings me back to your artistic work. How would you describe the objects that you showed us now? Are they art pieces? Are they part of a performance project? Or how would you describe the kind of the episteme of these objects? Or just experiments?
No, I guess the knit pieces definitely have a capacity as costumes or elements of costumes that could be used or worn in a performance. Yeah.
And do they have a transformative quality in a way? What do you think?
I think with those objects, I'm interested in the moment that you put it on. You know, so this gesture of, it's a bit less intimate than getting dressed all together from my underwear upwards, but it's just something that I put on, and so maybe I'm more interested in the transformative potential it has on me as a wearer, similar to a piece of jewelry or to makeup, or a pair of shoes. I don't know. Yeah.
You also worked quite a lot with herbs. Where did you find this, or how come you wanted to work with fragrance and with natural fragrance in a way? Why was it important to use herbs and natural fragrances?
For this specific, you mean? Well, I mean, there's a practical reason, because I have a lab at home in Berlin, which sadly I couldn't take with me. And of course, it would be great to like distill and do that on site, but given the season, I could not really get that fresh. But the herbs and flowers are interesting to me, not because they were a necessity I could have right now, but also because they have a culinary aspect. It brings together not just the fragrant, but also eating and other sort of like cultural forms, or also healing, or folk knowledge.
And they're always connected to our deep memories in a way. Also kind of a residual quality. Is that also something you're interested in?
I guess, well, on the one hand, there's residue that they leave on the fabric. If I touch it and I smudge it, it's going to stay. But also, I just forgot my second
kind
point.
of the connections to memory, like the smell as one of the sense which is very direct connected to our memories.
Yeah. I mean, that's also a question that is relevant in my work in general. How do you remember my performance, and what role does the olfactory part in that play? If you meet me, you can smell me wearing a perfume. What if I wore a jacket that had a visible display of what you smell? Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.